When people see us, they see just kids. But they forget we're the future, fast approaching. We're the ones reaching for the stars, Mars, and the moons. We're the ones dreaming big, because we're free to do so. We're like those who came before us, inspired by the 45 words that take 15 seconds to recite. The First Amendment, 5 freedoms, religion, speech, press, assembly, petition. That without them, we'd become not a silent generation, but the silenced. And for us to do anything, be anyone, be believers in good, chasers of change, seekers of truth, teachers of tomorrow. Ourselves. We must go forth into the unknown, knowing only one thing is certain, that the era of us has already begun. But our freedoms of gathering together, of speaking up, of writing down, of beliefs, always remain free. For me, for you, for humankind, for good. The First Amendment. Learn more at freedomforum.org.
Hello, and welcome to Celebrating Native American Journalism and 30 Years of the Freedom Forum. I'm Jan Newharth, Chair and CEO of the Freedom Forum. This program continues a year-long celebration, looking back at where we've been over the past 30 years and looking forward to the next 30. On July 4th, 1991, my father, Al Newharth, announced the birth of the Freedom Forum. And since then, the organization has championed First Amendment freedoms for all. From the beginning, diversity and inclusion in journalism have been at the forefront of the Freedom Forum's work, with a focus on women and people of color. My father recognized in particular that Native Americans were the most underrepresented minority group in journalism. So the Freedom Forum took action by introducing Native American students to journalism through annual programs, including the Crazy Horse Journalism Workshop, a 3-day conference at the Crazy Horse Memorial in Custer, South Dakota, for high school and college students, and the American Indian Journalism Institute, known as AIJI, a program that through the years evolved as an academic, scholarship, and internship program for Native college students. These 2 programs, specifically designed to increase the number of Native journalists, complemented the Freedom Forum's CHIPS Quinn Scholars Program, established in 1991 to provide training, mentoring, and internships to college students of color. As we celebrate Native American Heritage Month this November, we'll look back at the Freedom Forum's longtime commitment to Native American journalism, talk about representation of Native journalists today, and discuss the issues that are being covered in the community. You'll hear from 3 Native journalists who have all participated in a number of Freedom Forum programs. Mark Trahant is editor of Indian Country Today, an independent, nonprofit, multimedia news enterprise whose digital platform covers the indigenous world. Mark has had a long and valued relationship with the Freedom Forum. As a Freedom Forum Fellow in the 1990s, he authored Pictures of Our Nobler Selves, a history of Native American contributions to news media, published by our First Amendment Center. He serves on our Council of Advisors and is a former Freedom Forum Institute trustee. He has also served as a mentor to participants in both the AIJI and CHIPS Quinn Scholars programs. Katie Oyan is the West Desk editor for the Associated Press. Prior to that, she worked with Mark as managing editor for Indian Country Today. She has also served as assistant city editor, copy editor, and reporter at the Great Falls Tribune. An alum of the CHIPS Quinn Scholars Program, Katie has served as a mentor at the Crazy Horse Journalism Workshop. Shondiin Silversmith is an indigenous communities reporter for the Arizona Mirror. Prior to that, she covered the community for the Arizona Republic. She has also served as a digital producer for azcentral.com. Shondiin is a graduate of both AIJI and the CHIPS Quinn Scholars Program. So without further ado, let's get started as we celebrate Native American journalism and 30 years of the Freedom Forum.
Well, the American Indian Journalism Institute was, I think, even now, if you look back in history, was the single greatest change in the media in terms of bringing Native Americans into it. It impacted just in so many ways with really taking folks and saying, you know, this career exists, here's some opportunity, here's some basic training, and then helping folks find a network. The other program that did so much was the CHIPS Quins, and you saw between those two really a drive to bring Native professionals into the industry in a way that's unparalleled. And AIJ, I think, had the numbers. It probably produced more entry-level journalists than really any program I know of in history. But Chips Quinn did something else. It brought in high-quality performers. And so from Chips Quinn, you see a lot of editors now. You see a lot of folks that are contributing to the industry in just amazing ways, even now. I think and as we celebrate 30 years, one of the things that's most insightful about the Freedom Forum and its leadership was to include Native Americans across the board, not just in programs, not just in terms of staffing, but in terms of board membership. And at one point, the Freedom Forum had 2 board members who were Native American, which probably was better than any corporation in America, let alone any media organization. I think that Al Neuharth in particular had a vision that meant everybody needed to be included, and that meant all levels, not just one level.
I think diversity programs like the Chips Quinn Scholars Program are so important because, for one, there just aren't enough working Native American journalists these days. So anything that to help sort of foster that pipeline is really key. And also just bringing in that voice, that perspective to the newsroom, to the national conversation. I mean, Native American journalists know their communities, they know the issues, they have an understanding of, you know, the nuances, and bring an important and unique voice to that conversation.
The reason why that I think initiatives that Freedom Forum has presented in the past, like Chips Quinn or AIJI, are important is because it gives people who don't think journalism is attainable a chance to obtain it. Because, like I mentioned before, when I first started journalism, all I knew was that I wanted to be a journalist, but I didn't know how that was going to happen until somebody introduced me to AIJI. And once you get in an environment or you get exposed to any type of training or media or news or stories, or even just people that have the same type of passion you do and care about the same type of stories and issues that you do, it gives you the opportunity to want to do it.
My history with the Freedom Forum had an interesting start. I applied for a program at Columbia University and had a project outlined, and it was a fellowship. And I got a phone call from John Siegenthaler, and he said, "I don't want you to go to New York. I want you to come to Nashville." And so they gave me a fellowship to a program I had no idea even existed, and ended up in Nashville, where I worked on a project that ended up becoming a book called Picture of Our Nobler Selves at Vanderbilt. But one of the best parts of that was, one, it opened up a relationship with the Freedom Forum in a way that I just never imagined, particularly with John Siegenthaler and Charles Overby, who both spent a lot of time in Nashville. And then also over the years, tapped to different Freedom Forum programs from the Pacific Coast Center with Felix Gutierrez and with Al Neuharth in South Dakota, and many, many programs over the years.
My experience with the Chips Quinn Scholars Program was just really incredible. I was fortunate enough to be able to do the program twice, and it really helped me get started on my path in journalism. The training that I got through the CHIPS Quinn program was just really top notch. And the people I met, the network I was able to establish through the program was just so incredibly helpful in helping me get my foot in the door in the industry. I had actually 2 internships through CHIPS Quinn. And again, that just really got me started out in the business. And I'm just so grateful for that opportunity. I have mentored at Native American conferences for students, and one in particular was the Crazy Horse Journalism workshop in South Dakota. And that program was particularly meaningful for me for a couple of reasons. One, it's in South Dakota, and that's where I'm from, so it was always great to go back there. And 2, it was there were a lot of working Native American journalists serving as mentors. And I mean, that's just so incredible to see Native American students who are interested in the field being able to connect with successful, seasoned journalists.
During my time with AIJI, I just got into journalism. It was the first year that I knew that's what I wanted to do. I put all of my time and dedication into making sure that journalism was going to be the career that I was going to be a part of. And one of the professors at my university told me about AIJI. I didn't know such programs existed at the time. I mean, it was 2010 or 2009. I don't know. It was early. So when I found out about it, I was really excited because I didn't know there were programs that were geared towards Native journalists. I knew that that's what I wanted to do in my career. I wanted to be able to tell stories about my own community and communities like mine. So being able to find a program like AIJI that teaches indigenous people how to be journalists and provide them the skills to be able to become journalists, it was amazing to me. My experience with Chips Quinn was a little more intense, I guess you could say, because the training was a little bit more intense. You were a lot more independent in that program. They told you kind of what you needed to do, but as soon as they told you and kind of gave you the basic rundown of what you needed to do, it was up to you to make sure that you produced a story.
One of the challenges of the news media in covering Indigenous America is that the education system has kind of failed us. We don't go to school and learn about city, county, state, and tribes, yet tribes are in the Constitution. Tribes have a role that goes back 10,000 years or more in this country. And that ought to be a part of the story. And so instead of having the education, having our readership or audience having a basic understanding, it falls on the news media to try to create that understanding. And that's really challenging when some of the stories are contentious or breaking. And it really requires a really thoughtful approach to how we cover these stories to put this into context of the American story. And you think about how really the 2 main stories from the founding of this country would be the impact of genocide and the impact of slavery and how that shaped this modern state. And those are stories that we need to tell, not just in the media, but in broader society. And in some cases, the media does a pretty good job with that. Other cases, they fall in the same traps as everybody else.
I mean, really, if you think about it, any issue out there, there's a Native American angle. Anything you can think of, and it probably has been undercovered. Treaty rights and obligations, that's an issue that has been around for a very long time and is not going anywhere and is very important. Boarding schools, I think I would love to see more reporting around that. I think we will, but I think there's just so many stories to be told around that topic. Missing and murdered Indigenous women is a big one that I think is getting more attention lately. which is good to see.
So I just started at the Arizona Mirror, but I am helping them develop an Indigenous communities beat. I felt it was a great opportunity for more stories to be told about Indigenous communities, but also give readers a chance to see that these communities are a part of their community. They're a part of Arizona. They've been here long before Arizona was even a state. So I feel that it's great whenever news organizations finally want to take that step to create an Indigenous affairs beat or commit a reporter to cover Indigenous affairs. I think it's important that more newsrooms take that step because there are over 570 federally recognized tribes in the United States, but you also have state recognized tribes, and you have tribes that haven't even been able to get federally or state recognized. But these are all communities that are part of your community. As soon as more media outlets realize that they can include Indigenous voices in their daily voices that they cover, the better it'll be.
We really have failed miserably, historically, in hiring, recruiting, retaining, and promoting Native American Indians.
We have a long way to go to get to any sort of parity for Native Americans working in the media. Folks like Indian Country Day, I mean, our hiring is certainly a big part, but if you take that out of the equation, it's really woeful. We're here in 2021, and there's not a single Native American on broadcast network as a producer, a reporter, and certainly not an anchor. And I think that's an area that really needs to change because, again, it's part of this larger story that should be told. Newspapers, with the decline in hiring, haven't kept up pace, so there's a lot of opportunity there. I really think it's important for everybody, not just for Native Americans, to have that be part of our story and to have the media reflect that really wonderful diversity. Programs like American Indian Journalism Institute and Crazy Horse and Chips Quinn have been the programs that have worked. They've actually moved the needles and put people into positions where not only are they making decisions about news coverage, but the folks that are hired are folks that have been through these programs and recognize the world in different ways.
We're seeing lately an increase in Indigenous affairs reporting positions. I'm fortunate enough, I work for the Associated Press, and that's a beat that AP has had for a long time, but not a lot of news outlets do. I think we're seeing, just like within the past few years, more of these type of jobs coming up, which is really great to see. They're particularly, I think, nonprofit outlets have kind of led the way. Organizations like High Country News, which is a Colorado nonprofit that covers the American West, and they created an Indigenous affairs desk. And then from there, other outlets started to follow. I think they really kind of paved the way and showed, like, hey, this can be successful and there's a lot of interest in this. And so we're seeing more of that happen at like nonprofit news outlets, but then there also are groups like Report for America, which has their national service program, and they're helping fund a core of journalists to help cover underserved communities, kind of as the media industry changes and newspapers are unfortunately downsizing or closing. So they've really stepped up to help fill some of that void. And they are currently helping fund 14 Indigenous affairs reporting positions at newsrooms across the United States.
It's been really interesting to see an increase in Indigenous affairs coverage over even just the last 5 years and I think we're headed in the right direction, but we still have quite a ways to go because you still don't have, like you said, mainstream media outlets like the New York Times, the LA Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Boston Globe, or any of those major media publications, they still don't have an Indigenous affairs beat a part of their organizations. So you have Indigenous affairs beat more at a local level, at local newspapers like the Arizona Republic, AZ Mirror, the Navajo Times, and you have tribal newspapers like the Navajo Times or tribal media outlets like Indian Country Today. But on a national level, you don't see them covering Indigenous communities at the same rate as local levels.
Thank you for joining us for this special program, and we hope that you will be with us for other 30th anniversary programs as we celebrate more of the Freedom Forum's work. We invite you to join our 30th anniversary circle and continue your support as we build on our work to foster First Amendment freedoms for all for generations to come. Please visit freedomforum.org/30circle to contribute. And thank you again for joining us.